I was drowning in silk and diamonds the night my body betrayed me again. The charity gala swirled around me in a kaleidoscope of champagne flutes and false laughter, while I, Sadie Brown, heiress to the Brown Pharmaceuticals fortune, was busy calculating how many steps I could take before my legs gave out. "You look ravishing tonight," whispered Senator Harmon, his breath hot against my neck, smelling of expensive scotch and entitlement. I forced a smile while my fingers tightened around my clutch, knuckles white with effort. 3 minutes, I muttered to myself. 3 minutes and I could excuse myself gracefully. The chandelier light fractured through my vision as tiny pinpricks of sweat formed along my hairline, dampening my blonde hair. The familiar sensation of cotton filling my lungs returned, each breath becoming shallower than the last. I never made it to the 3-minute mark. One moment I was nodding at something about campaign contributions. The next I was staring at the ceiling, aware of the cool marble pressed against my back and the horrified gasps surrounding me. The diamonds at my throat felt like a noose. "Not again, Sadie." Dr. Wilson sighed 2 days later in my bedroom, my prison for the past 5 years. His stethoscope was cold against my chest, the ticking of my grandmother's antique clock on the mantel marking each second of my diminishing life. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this. What's the alternative? Dying in this room instead of at a gala?" The taste of bitterness coated my tongue, familiar as morning medicine. He sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress dipping slightly. Outside my window, Portland drizzle painted gray streaks against the glass, a perfect match for my mood. "I'm bringing someone in." "Another specialist? Another miracle worker?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "A home health nurse." The words hung between us like a death sentence. I'd resisted this final indignity for years, having strangers bathe me, feed me, watch me deteriorate. It was the last threshold I'd refused to cross. "Mother put you up to this." It wasn't a question. "Your mother loves you." His eyes, kind but firm, met mine, and she's right this time. I turned away, focusing on the rain. Each drop hitting the window was another second ticking away. Another breath counted. The scent of the roses on my nightstand, always fresh, always pink, mother's orders, suddenly seemed cloying, suffocating. "Her name is Megan Ramirez. She's different. Give her a chance before you terrorize her like the others." I didn't answer. I never had to answer. That was the one power illness had given me, the right to silence, to withdrawal. When he left, I reached for the drawer of my nightstand, fingers trembling as they closed around the small velvet box hidden beneath my journals. Inside was a tarnished compass, the needle perpetually stuck pointing northwest. I'd never told anyone where it came from or why. On my worst nights, holding it was the only thing that calmed the storm in my chest. The next morning I heard her before I saw her. Laughter, real, unrestrained laughter, echoed up the stairwell of our mausoleum of a house. Who laughs in a house of illness? When my bedroom door opened, the woman who entered wasn't wearing scrubs or a sympathetic smile. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, tendrils escaping to frame a face that struck me with an unsettling sense of familiarity. "I'm Megan," she said simply, green eyes assessing me without pity. "And you're the woman who thinks she's dying." I stared at her, this stranger who'd just challenged the central truth of my existence. My fingers instinctively reached for the compass hidden under my pillow. "I don't think I'm dying," I replied coldly, "and I am dying. There's a difference." She smiled then, not the careful smile of medical professionals, but something wild and knowing. "Everyone's dying, Sadie Brown. The question is whether you'll live first." I didn't know then that the compass in my hand had once belonged to her in another life, or that the dreams of mountains and avalanches that had plagued me for years weren't dreams at all, but memories. Absolutely not. My voice echoed against the walls of my bedroom, where I'd been imprisoned by illness for too long. "I'm not going outside just to satisfy your bizarre nature therapy theories." Megan had been my nurse for exactly 2 weeks, and already she was suggesting things that Dr. Wilson would have a stroke over. She stood by my window, pulling back curtains that hadn't been opened in months, letting Portland's rare February sunshine stream in uninvited. "Your medical file says you have an autoimmune condition, not an allergy to fresh air," she replied, completely unfazed by my rejection. The sunlight caught in her dark hair, highlighting strands of copper I hadn't noticed before. "My medical file is confidential," I snapped, pulling my cashmere blanket tighter around my shoulders. "And I'm your confidential nurse." She turned, hands on hips. "Look, your body is attacking itself because it has nothing better to do. You're trapped in this mausoleum with nothing but your thoughts and prescription pills." I hated that she had a point. I hated even more how she looked standing there, vibrant and alive, everything I wasn't. "Dr. Wilson says. Dr. Wilson has been managing your decline, not your recovery." Her words cut through my protests like a scalpel. 15 minutes, in the garden. If you feel worse, we come back in and I'll never mention it again. That's how I found myself, 30 minutes later, sitting on a stone bench in my family's neglected garden, wrapped in more layers than an Arctic explorer. The February air was crisp but not bitter, carrying the scent of damp earth and early crocuses. My fingers, usually numb, tingled with something that might have been cold or might have been sensation returning. "See? Not dead yet." Megan grinned, kneeling before me with gardening gloves and a trowel. She'd somehow convinced our groundskeeper to prepare a small patch for planting. "The day isn't over," I muttered, but without real venom. Something about being outside made my usual armor feel heavy and unnecessary. "Here." She handed me a bulb, our fingers brushing. A jolt ran through me, not unpleasant, but startling, like recognition. Her eyes widened slightly, and I knew she'd felt it too. "What was that?" I whispered. She looked away quickly. "Static electricity." But it wasn't. We both knew it wasn't. I planted 3 bulbs before exhaustion hit me, but it was different from my usual fatigue. This was the tired that comes from doing something, not from merely existing. When Megan helped me back to my room, her arm around my waist felt like it belonged there. That night, I dreamed of mountains. Not the vague, formless mountains of my usual nightmares, but specific peaks, jagged against a clear blue sky. I was climbing, lungs burning with effort and joy. Beside me was a woman with dark hair streaming in the wind, laughing as she reached for my hand. "Keep up, Catherine," she called, but her face was Megan's face, her eyes Megan's eyes. I woke, gasping, the name Thelena, on my lips, though I knew no one by that name. The dreams continued every night that week. Each time, I was stronger, climbing higher with the dark-haired woman. Each morning, I found myself looking forward to Megan's arrival with an intensity that had nothing to do with medical care. "You're different," my mother observed during one of her brief, dutiful visits. She studied me over her teacup, suspicious of the color in my cheeks. "That nurse is filling your head with false hope." "She's filling my days with something other than waiting to die," I replied, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. After Mother left, Megan and I pored over adventure magazines she'd smuggled in. "And I used to guide wilderness expeditions," she confessed, showing me photos of herself on mountain peaks. "Before I became a nurse." "Why did you stop?" I asked, fingering the glossy pages, hungry for the vastness they represented. "Someone I was responsible for got hurt." Her voice held an old pain. "I couldn't save them." I wanted to ask more, but something in her expression warned me away. Instead, I said, "Could someone like me ever do something like that?" The smile she gave me then transformed her face. "That's exactly what I've been waiting for you to ask." 3 days later, we were at Portland's largest outdoor equipment store, Megan insisting I try on hiking boots while my mother's disapproval radiated through angry text messages on my silenced phone. "Try this one," Megan said, guiding me toward a display tent set up in the camping section. We ducked inside, and suddenly we were alone in a small nylon universe, our knees touching in the confined space. "I can't believe I'm doing this," I laughed, the sound unfamiliar to my own ears. "Believe it," she whispered, her face inches from mine in the dim tent light. For a moment, I thought she might kiss me. For a moment, I wanted her to with an intensity that stole my breath more effectively than any illness. The tent zipper ripped open, a store employee apologizing for the interruption. The moment shattered, but something had fundamentally shifted between us. That night, I dreamt of an avalanche, of reaching desperately for a hand I couldn't quite grasp. I woke crying out Megan's name, though in my dream, I'd been calling for Elena. "What's this?" I asked, running my fingers along the leather spine of a book Megan had pulled from my bookshelf. We'd been going through my collection, or rather, she had been exploring while I watched her from my reading chair, fascinated by how she touched each volume with reverence. First edition of Summits and Secrets. You've read it? She raised an eyebrow, holding the mountaineering classic like it was made of glass. Cover to cover, 12 times. I smiled at her surprise. Just because I'm trapped in this body doesn't mean my mind can't wander. She sat on the ottoman at my feet, the book open between us. Your collection is incredible. Mallory, Herzog, Krakauer. You've got everything. Aspirational reading. I tried to keep my voice light. Places I'll never see. Megan closed the book with a decisive snap. Says who? Says my medical history, my doctors, my mother, and my inability to climb a flight of stairs without gasping for breath. She leaned forward, her green eyes intense. What if I told you I could get you to Columbia River Gorge? Not the summit of Everest, but somewhere wild, somewhere real. My heart stuttered, and not from arrhythmia. I'd say you're insane. Controlled conditions, short hikes, medical equipment on hand. The words tumbled from her lips, clearly a plan she'd been formulating. I've guided people with disabilities before. We'd take it slow. Dr. Wilson would never. I already asked him. I stared at her, speechless. She'd gone behind my back to my doctor? He said with modifications and proper precautions, it might actually benefit you. Something about increased circulation and psychological well-being. I couldn't process what she was saying. The possibility was too enormous, too terrifying, too wonderful. My mother. Will hate it, Megan finished for me. You're 32, Sadie. She doesn't get to decide. That evening, Dr. Wilson confirmed everything during his weekly visit. I wouldn't have suggested it myself, he admitted, checking my pulse. But Megan's proposal is sound. Small steps, controlled environment. And if I collapse in the wilderness? I challenged. Then you'll collapse doing something you love instead of at another charity function you hate. His eyes crinkled with unexpected understanding. I've been your doctor since you were born, Sadie. I've watched you shrink your world to accommodate this illness. Maybe it's time to push back. Mother's reaction was exactly as predicted. She swept into my room the next morning, the scent of her expensive perfume announcing her arrival before she did. Absolutely not, she declared, pacing across my Persian rug. This nurse has clearly lost her mind. I'm calling the agency today. No, you're not. My voice was quiet but firm. I'm doing this, Mother. She stopped, staring at me like I'd grown a second head. And you can barely make it through a shower without assistance. Then it's a good thing I'll have a nurse with me, isn't it? Her face softened into something more dangerous than anger, pity. Darling, I know you want to believe you can do these things, but get out. The words surprised us both. Excuse me? Get out of my room. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. I'm going on this trip. You can support me or you can be angry, but you can't stop me. After she left, I cried, from fear, from exhilaration, from the simple act of standing up for myself for the first time in years. Megan found me like that, tears drying on my cheeks as I sorted through the adventure books on my shelves. Bad time? She asked from the doorway. I shook my head. Perfect time. I just fired my mother. Her laugh was worth every moment of the confrontation. In that case, we should celebrate by spending her money. We need gear. The outdoor store was overwhelming. Racks of technical clothing, walls of equipment I couldn't name. Megan guided me through it all, patient as I tired quickly, insisting I sit while she gathered essentials. Try these, she said, handing me a pair of hiking pants. In the dressing room, I confronted my body, thinner than it should be, pale from years indoors. The pants fit differently than I expected, designed for movement rather than appearance. When I emerged, Megan's expression made me stand straighter. You look like an adventurer, she said softly. Our last stop was the tent display, the same one we'd almost kissed in weeks before. This time, when we ducked inside to test its size, there was an intentionality to our movements. We'll need to share, she said, her voice lower than usual. For body heat. Is that medically necessary? I asked, suddenly breathless for reasons unrelated to my condition. Absolutely. Her smile was mischievous. Doctor's orders. She reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Her fingers lingered on my cheek, and I leaned into her touch without thinking. We were closer than before, the air between us charged with something I hadn't felt in years, possibility. The moment stretched, sweet and taut with anticipation. Then a child's voice outside the tent broke the spell, asking loudly if there were bears in the store. We emerged laughing, but something had shifted again. As we paid for our purchases, my mother's credit card a small act of rebellion, Megan's hand found mine briefly. "This expedition is going to change everything," she said. I didn't know then how prophetic those words would be, or that the mountains were already calling us back to a story we'd left unfinished a century before. The Columbia River Gorge spread before us like a painting, all misty greens and blues, waterfalls threading silver ribbons through ancient basalt cliffs. I stood at the trailhead, leaning heavily on my new hiking poles, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. "Second thoughts?" Megan asked, adjusting the medical kit on her belt. She looked different out here, more confident, more herself. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, but tendrils had already escaped to frame her face. "About 50 of them," I admitted. "But I'm still going." She grinned. "That's my girl. My girl." The words echoed in my chest as we started down the trail, my steps careful and measured. We'd chosen the easiest path, wide, well-maintained, with minimal elevation change, but within 10 minutes my lungs were burning. "We can rest," Megan offered, noticing my labored breathing. "Not yet." Pride kept me moving forward. The forest around us smelled of damp earth and pine, so different from the antiseptic scent of my bedroom. Each breath, though painful, filled me with something wild and alive. 20 minutes in, my legs betrayed me. My right knee buckled, and I pitched forward with a startled cry. Megan's arms were around me before I hit the ground, strong and sure. "I've got you," she murmured, her breath warm against my ear. For a moment, we stayed like that, her body supporting mine, my heart hammering against my ribs. It wasn't just exertion making me breathless. "I can do this," I insisted, straightening up but not pulling away. "I know you can, but we do it together." She kept one arm around my waist as we continued, her body a steady anchor beside mine. We reached a viewpoint overlooking the river, where Megan insisted I rest while she unpacked our lunch. Sitting on a sun-warmed rock, watching her efficient movements, I was struck by how natural this felt, being outside with her, away from the sterile confines of my life. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, handing me a sandwich. "Like what?" "Like you're seeing something new." I took a bite to avoid answering immediately. "Maybe I am. I've only ever seen you in my house, in my illness. You belong out here." Something flickered across her face. Sadness? Longing? And used to think so. "What happened? You never really told me why you stopped guiding." She looked out over the gorge, her profile sharp against the sky. "When there was an accident, a client went off trail despite my warnings. By the time I reached her," she shook her head. "In touch I couldn't save her. After that I couldn't trust myself in the wilderness anymore. So you became a nurse instead, trying to save people in more controlled environments." Her laugh was hollow. "Until you. There's nothing controlled about you, Sadie Brown." The way back was harder. My body, unaccustomed to such exertion, protested every step. When we were almost at the trailhead, the sky darkened suddenly and fat raindrops began to fall. "Perfect," I muttered, as the gentle shower became a downpour. "Change of plans," Megan said, checking her weather app. "Storm's moving in fast. There's a ranger cabin half a mile up that fork. We can wait it out there." By the time we reached the cabin, we were soaked through. The small wooden structure was basic, one room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow cot, but it was dry. Megan moved with practiced efficiency, starting a fire while I shivered by the door. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," she said, not looking at me as she built up the flames. "I have dry things in my pack." I changed awkwardly behind her, hyper-aware of her presence in the small space. The borrowed clothes, a soft flannel shirt and fleece pants, smelled like her, a scent I'd come to associate with safety. "Your turn," I said when I was decent. When she turned around in her dry clothes, hair damp and curling around her face, something elemental shifted between us. The rain drummed on the roof, the fire crackled in the grate, And we were alone in a way we'd never been before. "Come sit by the fire," she said softly. We ended up side by side on the floor, backs against the cot, shoulders touching. Outside, thunder rumbled across the gorge. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," I said, watching the firelight play across her features. She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "'S a dream about mountains. Not the ones I've climbed, but others. Older. And in the dreams, I'm not alone." My heart stuttered. "Who's with you?" Her eyes met mine, questioning. "Someone I've been looking for. Someone with blonde hair and blue eyes who calls me by a different name." The air between us thickened. Without conscious thought, I found myself leaning toward her, drawn by something older than reason. Her hand came up to cup my cheek, and when our lips finally met, it felt like remembering rather than discovering. We fell asleep in each other's arms, the narrow cot barely accommodating us both. My head rested on her chest, her heart beat a steady rhythm beneath my ear. For the first time in years, my body didn't feel like the enemy. When morning came, breaking golden through the cabin windows, I woke feeling different. The constant ache in my joints had subsided, my breathing came easier, and a strange energy hummed beneath my skin. "You look better," Megan observed, watching me stretch. "I feel better." I paused, considering the impossibility. How can one day in the mountains do what years of medical treatment couldn't? She smiled, but her eyes held a question neither of us was ready to ask. "Maybe you're finally waking up." Dr. Wilson couldn't explain it. He reviewed my vitals for the third time, shaking his head in bewilderment. "Your inflammation markers are down, blood pressure normalized. Even your chronic anemia shows improvement." He removed his stethoscope, genuine confusion crossing his features. "What exactly happened on that mountain?" I glanced at Megan, who stood by the window of my bedroom. We hadn't discussed what transpired in that cabin, the kiss, the night spent in each other's arms, the strange sense of recognition that hung between us. We certainly hadn't mentioned it to my doctor. "Fresh air?" I offered with a small smile. He didn't look convinced. "I've been treating you for nearly 3 decades, Sadie. I've never seen your body respond like this to any intervention." After he left, promising further tests and cautious optimism, Megan sat on the edge of my bed. The distance between us felt deliberate, charged with unspoken questions. "You've been having the dreams too, haven't you?" she finally asked. "All about the mountains, about us." I nodded slowly. "They started the first night you took me into the garden. They feel like memories," she finished. Her eyes met mine, uncertain yet determined. "So I think we need help understanding what's happening." That's how, 3 days later, I found myself in the office of Marcus Gonzalez, hypnotherapist and past life regression specialist. His practice occupied the top floor of a Victorian in Portland's Pearl District, all exposed brick and crystals that would normally have made me roll my eyes. "Skepticism is healthy," Marcus said, noting my expression as I took in his workspace. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and none of the New Age affectations I'd feared. "I was a psychiatrist at OHSU for 15 years before I specialized in this work." "And what exactly is this work?" I asked, settling into the comfortable chair he indicated. "Helping people access memories their conscious minds have blocked, whether from this life or others." He spoke matter-of-factly, arranging recording equipment. "Sometimes the mind needs to remember to heal." Megan squeezed my hand. "Oh, you don't have to do this." But I did. Something was happening to me, to us, and conventional medicine had no answers. "I'm ready," I told Marcus. The hypnosis process was nothing like I expected. No swinging pocket watch, no commands to cluck like a chicken, just Marcus's calm voice, guiding me into a state of deep relaxation, my consciousness floating somewhere between waking and sleeping. "You're in a safe place," he said, his voice seeming to come from far away. "I want you to follow the path of your dreams, the mountains you've been seeing. Can you describe them to me?" Words came without thought. Jagged peaks, 3 in a row, like teeth against the sky. There's snow, but it's summer in the valleys. Wildflowers everywhere. "Are you alone?" "No." My heart rate increased. I could feel it pounding against my ribs. "Kalena is with me. She's mapping the north face. We're the first women to attempt this route." Beside me, I heard Megan's sharp intake of breath. "Who is Elena?" Marcus asked gently. In my mind's eye, I saw her, dark hair escaping a practical braid, green eyes bright with adventure, the same face I'd woken up to in the ranger cabin. My partner. My love. We tell everyone we're research colleagues, but... And who are you? The question confused me. I'm Catherine. Catherine Wells, Boston cartographer, expedition leader. The words felt right in my mouth, familiar as my own name. What year is it, Catherine? 1887. We've been in the Cascades for 3 months, documenting unexplored routes. Marcus's voice remained steady, though I sensed his increased interest. And how do you feel about Elena? Emotion welled up, so powerful it nearly broke the hypnotic state. She's everything. We're planning to leave society behind after this expedition. Build a life together in the wilderness, where no one can separate us. What happens on the mountain, Catherine? The scene shifted. I was no longer in the summer meadow but higher up, where the air thinned and snow clung to rocky outcroppings. Fear gripped me. Sheena, weather's turning. Elena wants to push for the summit, but I'm worried. The snowpack is unstable. My breathing quickened. In some distant part of my mind, I knew I was safe in Marcus's office, but the memory had me fully in its grip. We're arguing. She thinks we can make it before the storm hits. I'm telling her we need to descend. And then? A sound like thunder, but it's not thunder. My voice had become a whisper. A whole mountainside is moving. Elena is ahead of me on the slope. I'm screaming her name, reaching for her hand. Our fingers touch, and then... I came out of hypnosis with a gasp, tears streaming down my face. Megan was kneeling before me, her own cheeks wet. "She called me Elena," she said to Marcus, her voice shaking. "But that's impossible. How could she know that name?" Marcus looked between us, his professional demeanor giving way to genuine amazement. In all my years of practice, I've never witnessed such a clear regression. The details, the emotional response. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Have you been hypnotized before, Megan?" She shook her head. "Never." "Would you be willing, now that we've heard Sadie's experience?" I watched her face, saw the conflict there, skepticism warring with the undeniable pull of what we'd both felt since the moment we met. "Yes," she finally said. "And I need to know." As Marcus prepared for Megan's session, I tried to process what had happened. Catherine Wells. A name that felt as familiar as my own, yet belonged to a woman who had died over a century ago. A woman who had loved someone with Megan's face, Megan's spirit. "Ready?" Marcus asked her. Megan nodded, casting one last look at me before closing her eyes. "I'm ready to remember." "My name is Elena Vasquez." Megan's voice was different under hypnosis, slightly accented, more confident. "Botanist and field researcher from the University of California. I'm documenting alpine flora in the Cascades." Marcus kept his tone neutral, though I could see the fascination in his eyes. "What year is it, Elena?" 1887, summer expedition. She smiled, eyes still closed. "Though we're running behind schedule because Catherine keeps stopping to map everything." My heart lurched at the name, my name from another life. "Tell me about Catherine," Marcus prompted. Megan's face softened with an expression of such tender love it made my chest ache. "Brilliant cartographer. Too cautious sometimes. Beautiful in the morning light when she thinks I'm not looking." A small laugh. "She pretends we're just colleagues when others are around, but at night in our tent." Marcus gently redirected. "You're on the mountain with Catherine. Can you describe what's happening?" The change was immediate. Megan's body tensed, her breathing quickened. "And, storm coming. Catherine wants to turn back, but we're so close to the summit. First women to document this route." Her hands gripped the armrests. "And telling her just a little farther. She's angry, says I'm being reckless. And then..." The sound. Oh God, the sound. Her voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "A mountain is moving. Catherine is below me on the slope. She's reaching for me. Our fingers touch and then, nothing, cold. Can't breathe. Catherine." The last word was a desperate cry. Marcus brought her out of hypnosis quickly, and I was at her side before she fully returned, gathering her trembling body against mine. "I remember," she whispered against my neck. and I remember everything, Sadie. Catherine, the avalanche. Marcus gave us a moment before speaking. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like this. The details from both your regressions match perfectly. Names, dates, locations. It's impossible, I said, still holding Megan. And yet, here we are. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. There's a theory in reincarnation studies that souls who share intense bonds or unfinished business often find each other again. Sometimes the physical ailments we carry in this life are echoes of how we died in another. I thought about my chronic respiratory issues, the constant feeling of pressure in my chest. Like being unable to breathe, like being buried in snow. What do we do with this information? Megan asked, her professional composure returning, though she kept her hand firmly in mine. Marcus smiled gently. That's entirely up to you. We left his office in a daze, neither of us speaking until we were in Megan's car, rain pattering on the roof in a soothing rhythm. Portland Historical Society, she said suddenly, putting the car in drive. Now? We need proof, something tangible. Her eyes met mine, fierce and determined. If we really were Catherine Wells and Elena Vasquez, there might be records. The Historical Society was housed in a stately brick building downtown. Inside, a helpful archivist directed us to the research room after Megan explained we were looking for information on women naturalists and explorers in the 1,880 seconds. Hours passed as we poured through dusty records and microfiche. Just as my eyes were beginning to blur, Megan gasped. Here, she said, pointing to a small newspaper article dated September 1887. The headline read, Women Explorers Presumed Dead in Cascade Tragedy. My hands shook as I read the brief text. And Miss Catherine Wells of Boston and Miss Elena Vasquez of San Francisco, who embarked on a scientific expedition to map and catalog the northern Cascade Range, are presumed dead after failing to return from their ascent of Mount Baker. Search parties have recovered some equipment but no sign of the women. Their loss is a blow to the scientific community, which had taken great interest in their unprecedented all-female expedition. There's more, Megan whispered, sliding another folder toward me. Inside was a water-damaged journal, preserved between sheets of archival plastic. The handwriting inside matched mine exactly, though I'd never seen it before. August 15th, 1887. I read aloud, my voice barely audible. Elena insists we can reach the summit before the weather turns. I fear she takes too many risks, but her passion is why I love her. When we return to civilization, we plan to disappear together. Perhaps to the newly established Yellowstone, where 2 female naturalists might live in peace. Society has no place for women like us, but in the wilderness, we are free. Tears blurred my vision. These were my words, written by my hand in another life. A life cut short on a mountainside with the woman I loved. The journal was found in a waterproof satchel near the avalanche site, the archivist explained, having come to check on us. It was donated to our collection in the 1,950 seconds by a mountaineering club. We thanked her and left, the weight of confirmation heavy between us. Back in my car, rain still falling steadily, Megan finally broke the silence. We never got our chance, she said softly. We died before we could build that life together. I reached for her hand across the console. Maybe that's why I've been sick in this life. My body remembering what happened. My soul searching for you. She turned to me then, her eyes bright with unshed tears and something else, determination. So I found you this time. I'm not losing you again. When her lips met mine, it felt like the completion of a circuit broken over a century ago. The kiss deepened, her hands in my hair, mine gripping her shoulders as if she might disappear. We broke apart only when we needed air, foreheads pressed together. Take me home, I whispered against her lips. Not to my mausoleum of a mansion, but to her small apartment in the city. To the life we'd been denied once before. Absolutely not. My mother's voice cut through the room like a blade. And I've tolerated this adventure therapy nonsense, but this has gone too far. I stood in my bedroom, still technically my bedroom, though I'd spent most of the past week at Megan's apartment. We'd come to collect more of my things when Mother intercepted us. I'm not asking for permission, I said, continuing to fold sweaters into my overnight bag. and informing you that I'll be staying with Megan for a while." Mother's gaze shifted to Megan, who stood quietly by the window. "This is highly inappropriate. You were hired to provide medical care, not to—" She stopped, apparently unable to even articulate what she suspected. "Not to what, Mother?" I challenged, a lifetime of suppressed defiance rising to the surface. "Not to help me actually live instead of just existing? Not to make me happy?" "She's taking advantage of you," Mother hissed. "You're vulnerable, confused." "I'm in love with her." The words hung in the air, simple and true, and she loves me. Mother's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disgust, calculation. She settled on cold determination. "I'm calling Dr. Wilson. This situation is clearly affecting your mental health." "My mental health has never been better," I countered. "And Dr. Wilson already knows. He's supportive." That wasn't entirely true. We hadn't explicitly told him about our relationship, but he had remarked on my improved condition with something close to wonder. "I'll have her license revoked," Mother threatened, turning to Megan. "Professional misconduct. Taking advantage of a patient." Megan finally spoke, her voice calm. "Mrs. Brown, I understand your concerns, but Sadie is an adult. Her health is improving dramatically, and my feelings for her are genuine." "Get out of my house," Mother snapped. "You're fired." "You can't fire her," I interjected. "And I hired her privately last week. My trust fund, my decision." Mother's face paled. She'd forgotten that particular detail of my father's will. At 30, I gained control of my personal trust, separate from the family fortune. "This is that mountain sickness talking," she said, voice shaking slightly. "To these delusions about past lives. You need help, Sadie." I zipped my bag closed with finality. "What I need is to live my life, with or without your blessing." We left her standing there, speechless for perhaps the first time in her life. In the car, Megan reached for my hand. "Are you okay?" I nodded, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "And am preparing for that confrontation my whole life. I just never had anything worth fighting for before." That night at Megan's apartment, we celebrated our small victory with takeout and wine, laughing as we planned a future that had once seemed impossible. But as midnight approached, a familiar tightness gripped my chest. "Sadie?" Megan's voice seemed distant as I struggled for breath. "What's wrong?" "Can't breathe," I gasped, panic rising as the room began to spin. The next hours passed in a blur of ambulance lights and emergency room efficiency. By morning, I was stabilized in a private room, monitors beeping steadily beside me. Dr. Wilson stood at the foot of my bed, reviewing my chart with a furrowed brow. "Your body's been through significant changes recently," he explained. "Sometimes improvement isn't linear. This setback doesn't mean we're losing ground." But I could see the concern in his eyes, mirrored in Megan's exhausted face as she sat beside my bed. When he left, she took my hand, her fingers cold against my skin. "I thought I was losing you," she whispered. "You can't get rid of me that easily." I tried to smile, but fear crept in. What if this is how it always ends for us? What if we're doomed to find each other and lose each other over and over? Megan shook her head firmly. "And I don't believe that. We found each other across lifetimes. We remember so we can change the pattern." I was discharged the next day with adjusted medications and strict instructions to rest. Back at Megan's apartment, I slept fitfully, dreams of snow and falling haunting me. When I woke, rain was lashing against the windows, thunder rumbling in the distance. Megan sat on the edge of the bed, watching me with an intensity that made my heart skip. "I've been thinking," she said, taking my hand, "about the mountain, about what happened to us there. In our past life?" She nodded. "What if our story isn't finished because we never got closure? What if your body is still carrying the trauma of that death?" Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating her determined expression. The storm outside mirrored the one that had trapped us in the cabin weeks ago, the first time we'd acknowledged what was growing between us. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. "We need to go back, to the place where Catherine and Elena died, to finish what they started." Fear gripped me, not of the mountain, but of losing this second chance. What if something happens to you? I couldn't bear it. Nothing will happen, she promised, moving closer until her forehead rested against mine. This time, we're prepared. This time, we know what's at stake. As thunder crashed overhead, her lips found mine, gentle at first, then with increasing urgency. My body responded despite its weakness, a hunger awakening that had nothing to do with illness and everything to do with the woman in my arms. I need you, I whispered against her mouth, pulling her down beside me on the bed. Her hands trembled as they moved beneath my shirt, tracing patterns on skin that had known little touch beyond clinical examination. When she hesitated, I guided her, showing her that my body, despite its limitations, was capable of pleasure, of desire. The storm raged around us as we discovered each other, lightning illuminating bare skin, thunder swallowing our gasps and whispers. In those moments, there was no illness, no past tragedy, only Megan and me, finding in each other what Catherine and Elena had lost. Afterward, lying in her arms as rain gentled against the windows, I made my decision. We'll go, I said softly. To the mountain, to finish our story. This is against medical advice, Dr. Wilson said, his voice tight with concern as he finished my examination. Your body is still recovering from the last episode. We were in his private office, where I'd insisted on a final checkup before our journey. Outside, autumn was painting Portland in shades of gold and crimson, a perfect day for beginnings. I know the risks, I replied, buttoning my shirt. But I also know what I need. He sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. As your doctor for 32 years, I'm obligated to advise against this trip, as someone who's watched you fight this condition your entire life. He paused, replacing his glasses. I understand why you need to go. Megan had been quiet during the examination, but now she stepped forward. I'll have emergency equipment. Satellite phone. We're not taking unnecessary risks. Dr. Wilson studied her, then me, his expression softening. You two have found something rare. Whatever happens on that mountain, hold on to it. His words followed me as we drove east the next morning, the city giving way to forests and then the stark beauty of the Cascades. Megan was focused behind the wheel, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand, as if reassuring herself I was still there. We're not going all the way to Mount Baker, she explained as we turned onto a Forest Service road. That's where Catherine and Elena died, but it's too challenging for now. This area has the same geological features, the same energy. I nodded, understanding instinctively. It wasn't about the exact location, but what it represented: closure, completion, the chance to rewrite an ending. We parked at a remote trailhead, the lot empty this late in the season. As Megan unloaded our gear, checking and double-checking the medical supplies, I stood gazing up at the peaks rising around us. They seemed both threatening and welcoming, like old adversaries who had earned my respect. Ready? Megan asked, adjusting my pack to sit more comfortably on my shoulders. The trail was steeper than our previous hikes, but my body responded differently this time. Each step felt purposeful, each breath a gift rather than a struggle. We climbed in companionable silence, stopping occasionally to drink water or admire a particularly spectacular view. By mid-afternoon, we reached a natural plateau overlooking a valley carved by ancient glaciers. The spot Megan had chosen for our camp offered a panoramic view of 3 jagged peaks, the same 3 peaks from my regression. This is it, I whispered, recognition washing over me. But they were here. Megan nodded, her eyes bright with emotion. I've been drawn to this spot for years, used to hike here alone, never understanding why it felt so significant. We set up our tent with practiced efficiency, working together as if we'd done it countless times before, perhaps we had, in another life. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the valley, Megan built a small fire while I arranged our sleeping bags, zipped together to form one. How do you feel? She asked, as we sat side by side, watching flames dance against the gathering darkness. I took a moment to assess my body, surprised by what I found. Strong, I said finally. Clearer than I felt in years. It was true. The pressure that had lived in my chest for as long as I could remember had eased, replaced by a lightness that seemed to grow with each passing hour on the mountain. Something's happening to you, Megan observed, not a question but a statement of fact. I can see it. Your color, your movements. You're transforming up here. I leaned against her, drawing comfort from her solid presence. Do you think it's possible that coming back here could actually heal me? I think our souls remember more than our minds do. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and I think some wounds can only be healed by returning to where they were inflicted. That night in our tent, with the mountain winds whispering around us, we made love with a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. Each touch felt like reclaiming something lost, each kiss a promise renewed. I loved you then, I murmured against her skin. And I love you now. Dawn broke clear and cold, the kind of pristine mountain morning that makes you believe in miracles. We emerged from our tent to find the world transformed by overnight frost, every branch and blade of grass glittering in the early light. There's something I want to show you, Megan said after breakfast, leading me to a rocky outcropping above our camp. From this vantage point, we could see the exact formation of peaks that had appeared in both our regressions. Standing there, wind tugging at my hair, I closed my eyes and felt it, the presence of Catherine and Elena, their story intertwined with ours. This is where it happened, Megan said softly. Not the exact mountain, but the same story. They were right here, looking at this view, planning their future together. I opened my eyes, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were release. With each drop that fell, I felt lighter, freer, the constant weight in my chest dissolving like morning mist. I can breathe, I gasped, drawing in a deep lungful of mountain air. Megan, I can really breathe. She watched in wonder as I spread my arms wide, filling my lungs completely for perhaps the first time in my life. No tightness, no resistance, just the pure joy of air flowing freely. It's leaving you, she whispered, eyes wide. A trauma, the memory of dying, it's letting go. I laughed, the sound echoing across the valley. Catherine's laugh, my laugh. The boundaries between past and present blurring and then reforming into something new. We're free, I said, reaching for Megan's hands. They're free. As if in response, a gust of wind swirled around us, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers that shouldn't have been blooming in autumn. For a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn I saw them, two women in old-fashioned climbing gear, arms around each other, smiling as they faded into the mountain light. They found their way home, Megan said, her voice thick with emotion. And so have we. 6 months can change everything. I stood at the window of what had once been my mother's formal dining room, watching volunteers transform the garden into a healing space. Where once there had been meticulously trimmed topiaries, now medicinal herbs and native plants thrived. The mansion that had been my prison was becoming a sanctuary for others. The first group arrives next week, Megan said, coming to stand beside me. Her hand found mine, our fingers intertwining with practiced ease. Dr. Wilson thinks we'll be at capacity by summer. I smiled, still marveling at how different my life had become since that day on the mountain. My mother would be horrified. Your mother is horrified, Megan corrected with a laugh. But she's coming around. I saw her sneaking those financial documents into your office yesterday. My mother hadn't spoken to me for 2 months after I announced my plan to convert the Brown estate into a wellness center for chronic illness patients. When she finally broke her silence, it was only to inform me that I was squandering my inheritance on a new age nonsense. But recently, I'd caught glimpses of reluctant interest as the project took shape. She's a businesswoman at heart, I said. Even she can't deny the foundation's success. The Sadie Brown Foundation for Alternative Healing had garnered unexpected attention in medical circles after my case study was published, spontaneous remission following nature immersion therapy. Dr. Wilson had documented my transformation with scientific precision, careful to present the facts without speculation about past lives or soul connections. Speaking of business, Megan said, turning to face me. Marcus called. He wants to collaborate on a research project about trauma patterns across lifetimes. Says our case has opened up new possibilities in his field. I leaned into her, savoring the simple pleasure of physical contact without pain. What did you tell him? That we'd think about it. She kissed my forehead. But first, we have a date with a mountain. Today marked exactly 1 year since Megan had walked into my bedroom and challenged everything I thought I knew about living and dying. We'd planned a special hike to commemorate the anniversary, back to the trail where we'd first connected, where I'd first begun to heal. The Columbia River Gorge welcomed us with perfect spring weather, wildflowers carpeting the slopes in vibrant purples and yellows. We hiked at a steady pace, my body strong and responsive in ways I still sometimes found surprising. "Remember how you could barely make it a quarter mile that first day?" Megan asked, as we reached the viewpoint where we'd eaten lunch a year ago. "I remember you catching me when I fell," I replied, squeezing her hand. "Oh, you've been doing that ever since." She smiled, but there was nervousness behind it, unusual for my confident, capable partner. "Let's go a little farther. There's a spot I want to show you." The trail climbed more steeply, switchbacking up to a rocky promontory that offered a breathtaking panorama of the gorge. The river below glinted silver in the afternoon light, and distant peaks stood sharp against the blue sky. "This is where I used to come," Megan said softly, and I felt lost after the accident that made me quit guiding. Something always drew me here, like I was waiting for someone. I turned to her, understanding dawning. "Oh, you were waiting for me. For lifetimes, it seems." She took both my hands in hers, her green eyes serious. "Sadie Brown, I lost you once on a mountain. I found you again against impossible odds. I don't want to waste another moment of this life we've been given." My heart raced as she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside nestled a ring, not a diamond, but a band of rose gold with a small emerald the exact color of her eyes. "Will you marry me?" she asked, voice steady despite the emotion shining in her eyes. "Not because we were Catherine and Elena, but because we're Sadie and Megan, and this love is ours to shape however we choose." Tears blurred my vision as I nodded, words momentarily beyond me. When she slipped the ring onto my finger, it felt like the completion of a circle begun long ago. "Yes," I finally managed, pulling her close. "In this life and any others that follow." Our kiss was witnessed only by mountains and sky, the same timeless sentinels that had watched our story unfold across centuries. When we broke apart, laughing and crying at once, I felt the last pieces of my old self falling away, making room for who I was becoming. That evening, we celebrated at our favorite restaurant in Portland, where the chef, a friend of Megan's from her wilderness guiding days, prepared a special meal in our honor. As we clinked glasses of champagne, I caught sight of our reflection in the window, two women radiant with joy, with possibility. "To finding each other," Megan toasted. "To second chances," I added. Later, walking hand in hand along the Willamette River, we paused to watch the city lights shimmer on the water. The night was mild, scented with flowering trees and urban energy. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, "if we'll remember this life in the next one? If we'll find each other again?" Megan considered this, her profile thoughtful in the gentle light. "And I think some souls are connected by threads that can't be broken. Not by death, not by time." She turned to me, smiling. "But I'm not in any hurry to test that theory. This life with you is more than enough." I leaned into her embrace, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. The compass that had once guided Catherine and Elena had led us here, to this moment, to this love. Whatever mountains awaited us, we would climb them together.